All right, guys, what's up? It is Wednesday at 7:30, so it's combat ready tactics night, and I'm particularly excited about tonight's topic because I think that what we're going to talk about tonight is a probably our most challenging scenario that we deal with as firefighters, and it's something that gets debated and talked about a lot. It's something that every one of us needs to be prepared for at any moment, and that is arriving first due at a residential fire with reported or known people trapped. So that's going to be our topic of the night tonight. We're going to talk about what we think our actions should be or would be as the first arriving engine company, ladder company, and chief officer. And in particular, another kind of special scenario we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about not only the initial actions at these incidents where we have multiple companies available to do multiple things. But we're also going to do a scenario of John Wayne time. When you're the Lone Ranger, when you're the only engine, or when you're the only truck, or when you're the only chief on scene, and there is no help immediately available. What do you do? Do you address the fire? Do you address the victims? Do you address both? Or what are your next actions going to be? So should be a great discussion, a very applicable discussion to a very tough kind of fire. So I'm looking forward to it. Now, before we get started, a couple of things I wanted to say. Those that follow social media and the fire service internet have probably heard about a very tragic fire in Lower Merion Township, Pennsylvania, that occurred just a couple of days ago on July 4th night, actually, where firefighter Sean DeMonk was killed operating the line of duty at a house fire. I want to definitely send my thoughts and all of our thoughts and condolences out to the members of the Lower Merion Fire Department fire companies and the family and friends of Sean DeMonk on a very, very tragic event. This touches us a little personally because we have been working at Combat Ready. We've been working with the Lower Merion Township Fire Departments over the past few months on a couple of topics. We just spoke with the group a couple of weeks ago, and I remember specifically seeing Sean's name in the roster. It's also, basically the town next to where my parents live. So it's just a lot of people in the area that I've known for a very long time, and it's very tragic when any of these things happen, but sometimes it hits a little closer to home. So definitely keeping Lower Merion Township, the firefighters, family and friends of firefighter DeMonk in our thoughts and prayers tonight. In a little bit more better news, we're excited to be getting back on the road. COVID is slowing down a little bit. We're getting back into the busy time. So we actually have a few classes coming up that might be in your area that you could get in on. This Saturday we'll be in Junaluska, North Carolina, doing the Aggressive Command Supports Aggressive Firefighting program. The enrollment on that program is open. I believe that since it's a class that's hosted through the North Carolina Community College system, that it's next to free or entirely free in cost. So if you are interested in that, check out the stories on my social media, or you can send me an email and I'll give you some more information on that. Also, coming up in August, and we'll have some enrollment information about this out shortly, we're going to be doing the Aggressive Command program in both Progress, PA, right there bordering Harrisburg, and in Dover Township, both in August. So if you're interested in any of those classes, or if you're interested in setting something up for your department or in your area or for your group in 2022, we're actively booking things, and schedules fill up faster than you think. So if you're interested, please reach out, and we'd be very eager to set something up with you. So tonight, I'm joined by no strangers to the call, two of my good friends and great fire officers and tacticians. We have Bill Cunningham from Columbia, South Carolina, and Frank Malta from Frederick County, Maryland, on here tonight with me. How you guys doing tonight?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good. Thanks for having me.
You guys, so Bill is a captain on Ladder 14 in the city of Columbia, South Carolina, state capital. Bill and I were firefighters there together. And Frank is a battalion chief in Frederick County, Maryland, which is kind of, I don't know, what would you say, maybe like 40 minutes west of Baltimore, kind of on the Pennsylvania line there. So anything exciting going on with you guys lately? Any good fire stories or anything?
Not a ton of fire stories out of the academy here, but getting ready to graduate a class next week, and then 10 days after that, I pick up 50 more. So
Yeah, and you guys are really kicking ass with your training programs and stuff. I mean, a lot of stuff Frederick County in general is doing. I mean, but if anybody is not paying attention to Frederick County Fire Department's training, check out their social media and just some of the great real world stuff, practical stuff, and good preparation for the street that they're doing. If you're looking for some good training ideas and some good training scenarios, that's definitely a hot spot there. Bill, I know you've been running lots of fires there on the light duty list.
Yeah, unfortunately, I see the social media posts that they are going to fire, and I'm very happy for them. Unfortunately, I've been out for almost a month now, on the injured list, itching to get back. But I'm glad to be here and talk about this topic. We've recently done a lot of training, and we've kind of discussed these tactics at work. And I think one of the biggest things is your tactics are usually solid if you have a game plan, and that game plan can be training at the kitchen table on what we're going to do in this particular situation, or it could be just on the way to the fire, kind of feeling out how far behind these other companies are. So I think that there's a lot of tactics out there that can be taken into consideration and be done, and I don't think any of them are wrong. But on an instance where I might have an idea, I want the rest of my three members to have the same flow and idea as what I'm doing, and not be, kind of messed up when we get there. So
Yeah.
We'll dive into that a little bit later.
Yeah, for sure. As always, the plan matters hugely. So as we kind of dive into the topic here for everybody listening live, I do have the chat up here. I'm keeping an eye on it, and if you've got a question or a scenario that you'd like us to address, throw it up there in the chat. And we won't be able to hit every one of them, but I'll try to hit as many as we can. So if you've got something you're looking for our opinion on, please get it up there, as early as you can, and we'll try and keep you included. So let's talk about the scenario. Let me set it up for you what I want to talk about tonight. So what I want to talk about tonight is a fire in a residential building. So we're going to be inclusive of, house fires and apartment fires. When I say apartment fires, let's stick with the range of, somewhere around a 2 to 4 story garden style apartment, center hallway, maybe open stairs, maybe closed stairs, but we're not really getting into a enclosed stair, center core, mid-rise apartment building, none of that that's a kind of a little bit of a different ball, right? So tonight we're kind of talking about the house fire, and the quote unquote bread and butter apartment fire, as much as I don't like to use that bread and butter thing. But, and the scenario is going to be that you have a strong inclination that there is somebody trapped in this building, or that you have specific information that there is, either whether that's through dispatch, or whether that's on, through bystander reports, or whether it's something that you actually see when you arrive. So let's kind of start off and talk about a little bit about the operations in our departments, and we don't have to run down everything, but just Frank, why don't you kind of run us through a little bit, like what the initial fireground operations on an incident like that might look like, resource-wise, timing-wise, who's doing what-wise, on one of your fires there in Frederick.
So the thing with Frederick County is that because of how large it is, like there's a couple different variations and ways that can go down. In the Frederick City area, where units are arriving within seconds of each other, it's very easy for the special services to take on that role of the primary search, and the engine company focus on getting water on the fire. Once you start moving to some of the outer lying areas, there's a very good potential where you're going to be arriving and be there operating by yourself, for a period of time, just as a single unit. We don't have too many double houses where units are consistently getting out together to be able to do that. So I guess we'll talk more on the single unit response, where in most of these cases we'll have the luxury of, like, the ambulance from that station will be chasing the engine company. So that affords you 2 more people. The people that ride our ambulances are firefighters as well. So that affords you 2 more people to either, begin that primary search or stretch the line while the engine company does the search. or in the instance where the engine company's arriving by itself, if the ambulance is on a run or whatever, then then you have a real decision to make as to whether you're going to start getting water on the fire, you're going to split your crew. So I don't know if there is a blanket answer for that. I think it's very situational dependent.
Would you say? I mean, a couple of things. What's the average? Like, what's the staffing levels that you might be dealing with? And I mean, is it typically like dedicated engine and truck operations, or does people kind of have to be a jack of all trades?
No, so like the way that our the SOPs are, you get 5 engine companies and 3 special services on the box alarm. The staffing is 3-person staffing on everything, and that can certainly be increased at some of the stations that have volunteers. So you could be riding a little heavier than 3, but 3-person staffing is the accepted minimum. I mean, I'm sure there are occasions, and I've been a part of some of these occasions where you may show up on an engine company and get tasked with something that's not an engine function because it takes priority. But typically it rolls out where you stay within your function, and unless something emergent needs to go down.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Bill, how about you?
I know that you said there was like some sort of inkling that there might be somebody trapped, but I would say that from the get-go, I try and have my gears spinning in the same direction, so to speak, and my mindset is the same, whether I heard that on dispatch or I didn't. So if they didn't say it or I didn't get the report, I would still be in the same mindset of what I was going to do. So we do have dedicated truck, dedicated rescue geared in our support companies to our engines. And if we're on such an apartment fire like that, it's really based on, well, let me back up. So lately we seem to be doing truck stuff and not really understanding and flowing on what the engine might be doing. So we find that can be kind of dangerous. If you're doing truck stuff and you don't know what the engine is doing, it's hard to support something that you don't have an inclination on what they're doing, and vice versa. If you're doing engine stuff, you should kind of feel like you have some sort of drive on what the truck may be doing. So to separate those for task level things is great. Dedicated truck, dedicated engine, but they have to mesh, with some sort of non-communicative, approach. And so we tend to typically show up, and if it's multiple stories, and I have fire or smoke coming from multiple stories, I'll always run with the adage that we talk about in classes, Chief, and that's, fire is below you until proven otherwise. So it's tough for me to jump into a tactic where, I want to do a split crew and vent and search at the same time like I would on a residence when I have multiple floors like that, because I just have to dedicate myself to gearing down, like where does the engine want to put its line and what doors do I need to soften or force for them to get into that area. And then I can kind of back up and punt and play off my truck tactics role and either run with them in a search pattern or back up, let them have this hallway that is going to get jammed up with hose line, and start choosing windows as my egress point.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So, I mean, a lot of good stuff there so far. A couple of things, from my perspective is, number one, it's, one of my things I always try and talk about is I'm already in this mindset. The moment the box tone, which is a structure fire for us, goes off, I'm already thinking there's somebody trapped in that building. So for me, there's not a transition point where I'm like, there's probably nobody in this building. I'm not worried about that at all. Oh my gosh, there's people trapped. What do I do now? Like that doesn't happen, right? Because, I'm a very big advocate that you have to go out the door assuming that you're going to this offensive fire and that there are people trapped in that building, and that you're going there with that assumption, acting accordingly, and you scale back from that if either of those things turn out not to be true. If it turns out to not have anybody trapped, to not be an offensive fire, and maybe it's defensive in nature, or to not be a fire at all. But I think that a lot of fire departments, a lot of firefighters get themselves in very deep trouble by trying to scale up, by going there to let me see what I got. And then they're like, oh my gosh, what I got is 2 floors of fire with a couple of kids trapped in the back, and I'm not at all ready for that. And that's where they get in a lot of trouble being behind the 8 ball because of, one of the things with these fires is just, I mean, how much urgency there is. I mean, if you've never been, ripped out of a fire truck by a mother and then shoved at the building saying, "Please save my baby," like, I mean, that's a life-changing experience. I mean, I don't think there's anything that happens to you more intense than that. And so the pressure is on, the boilerplate is on when that happens. And quite frankly, you're going to do what you're going to do. You're not going to make something up on the front lawn that you haven't thought about or you haven't talked about or you haven't practiced. You're going to roll the dice and do whatever you think or feel is best. And it may or may not be the right thing, going back to what Bill said, depending on how well you did or didn't prepare. And it seems that when we have these people trapped scenarios, they're also usually pretty tough fires, meaning that it's not just like, oh, there was a haze of smoke and like a half a room off. Like, it seems to usually be that when you have these people trapped scenarios, the thing's cranking. And so that if we don't operate effectively, and like you said, with a plan, then not only do we maybe not save the victim, but maybe we get some firefighters in some pretty bad situations as well. Because everybody knows, I mean, we move pretty quick when the station tones drop. You move really quick when it's a box. And when they say, for the house fire with people trapped, I mean, the sky's the limit, right? I mean, you're in overtime. And so that intentionally definitely adds a lot to the incident.
Mm-hmm. It's really just about, reps and being repetitive. I don't bring the same tactics to every single fire, but I do want to set some sort of like, image out there that people can almost guess what I'm going to do. And that's what I teach, when we do our truck schools and things like that. Like, for example, I'm not there, but I know if Captain Ford goes to a single family residence, I know what he's going to do. You know what I mean? And I want that nonverbal, that communication to transfer all the way up to command. I want command to sit in his car and say, when ladder 14 shows up and it's third shift and Cunningham's there, I know what he's going to do for the most part. You know what I mean? Because, I've kind of showed and taught my way into these paths, so to speak, where, I might go full crew on this. They know that's what I'm going to do. You know what I mean? And just kind of not to like set it in stone, like when we have an apartment fire, this is what I do every single time. But it's just sort of this, it kind of instills a little bit of, trust, in me that he can kind of understand what I want to do, and what I'm going to do for the other companies.
It's a huge benefit to command, right? And this becomes an issue at these fires because there's so many moving parts. But if I know that Bill's coming to my fire and I already trust Bill and I know what he's going to worry about, I don't need to worry about telling Bill what to do or not to. I can focus on the unique parts of the fire because now I already have this ingrained trust, in what my companies are going to do. I don't have to worry about telling everybody to stretch an attack line and bring a ladder. I know they're going to do that. You know what I mean?
And that's why, different shifts, take my department, different shifts do different things, but the fire goes out, people still get pulled out. When first shift on ladder 14, for example, doesn't operate the same way I do, but they've successfully pulled people out, second shift as well, whatever. But then that's where you get the notion like, well, it's kind of a different fire department. Well, that's because they've set their ways and how they do things, how they communicate. And yeah, it is a little bit different to operate on a different shift because that's the way it is. But, the end goal, because they have a game plan before they left the house, when they trained on it, the fire went out just as fast, and they have a track record of saving life.
So let me ask you this, Frank, what do you think about this? Hey, you get the report, you're coming down the road, communications comes over and says, hey, we got phone calls, everybody's out of the building, or you pull up and the bystander runs up and says, don't worry, everybody's out. How does that make you feel?
It really, honestly, don't mean anything to me. To me, like the building's not empty till we say it's empty. Like it's like, oh, you told me, oh, we're good to go. We don't need to do a primary search here. Well, there's been time and time again where there's been instances where that report was there. And what do you know? Somebody just happened to show up, came home early from college one night, came in the house. You didn't know he was even there or, whatever. Somebody that wasn't supposed to be there actually was there. So no, we're the ones that make that decision.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. If it's an offensive fire, the primary search is part of the strategy. And once that's completed, then we can begin to feel pretty good that there's nobody in there, but not before that. Just finishing up a little background on my operations, because it kind of frames, how I might talk about things a little bit tonight. I'm in a staffed fire department. Our box alarm is going to put 5 engines, 2 trucks, and a rescue on the scene. There's always outliers. You could have one area of the city where one guy gets there and it's John Wayne time for 10 minutes. And you could have another part of the city where everybody gets there within 30 seconds of each other. But staffing for me is going to look like 3 people on the engine and 3 to 4 people on the truck. And we are pretty engine and truck focused, meaning that engines principally focus on extinguishing fire, and ladder companies principally focus on search and ventilation and forcible entry and those. So, and I say that because that's not how it is everywhere. A lot of places are riding 2 to 3 people on a quint or whatever the whatever kind of apparatus, and they've got to kind of do a little bit of jack of all trades, and we are going to talk about that a little bit. But so let's talk about this now. So Frank, you're going down the street to this fire. You're going to a report of a fire, and then all of a sudden, they say, hey, there's somebody trapped in this building. What things that you weren't going to do might you think about doing, and what things were you going to do that you say, I'm no longer going to do that?
Well, so right out the gate, if we're following the rules, initially I would probably be assigning that ambulance as a 2 out. Now with the report of people trapped, that negates the need to have a 2 out initially. What would be running through my mind, like when I was an engine company officer, is either tasking them with the search or with the line. And typically I would do the search as the engine company, just because like we're going down the road and we're dressed ready to roll. Whereas that when they arrive, they're going to, have that little bit of a delay getting turned out, and then get that line in place. So, that could weigh in on. And then ultimately, like when you arrive, what your conditions are, it could be something where, hey, we got a small fire that was in front of the front door and that's what's keeping somebody out. You get water on the fire and then it's no problem. Or you got a whole first floor going, you got people on the top, and then you're going to have to adjust accordingly there. Yeah.
Are there any things that any other things that you would say, hey, I would do this if this was a regular fire, but because it's people trapped, I don't have time to do that anymore?
Right, wrong, or indifferent, and I've been in this position before, running a box alarm report of people trapped, failed to do 360. The supplements we're getting on the way down the road, they're telling me she's trapped in the living room, which, lesson learned, was not in the living room when I found her. But did not do a 360 that morning. But as far as everything else, we're still laid out. Told the lineman, and that morning I didn't have the luxury of an ambulance, so told my lineman to stretch on it. I went and booted the door, started the search, Collier's Mansion conditions, had a room going that was starting to come out, fire coming over top, and I could hear her screaming. So made a decision to shimmy past where the fire was at to get back to her, and because I have all the faith in the world in my guys, because we train and we do it, I knew that line was going to be in place and getting water on the fire when I was coming back out. And that was the case. And she's still here today.
Yeah. How about you, Bill? Any things that are, are all of a sudden turning on or turning off for you because, now it's a report of somebody trapped?
I think, I've always been, I'm still fairly a new officer. And, even when I was riding up, I felt like I was comfortable and things of that nature. But now I'm getting to the point where I understand the importance of the 360, but that's probably one of the first things that tend to go, and it really just depends on the response that's coming, and that's completely my bad. Everybody en route really deserves to know, what the wrap on the house looks like. But I hope, that they understand when I give them a 180, so to speak. But as far as everyone's out, that doesn't really justify a number for me. So, if it's victims or no victims, traditionally, arriving on the truck, things kind of go the same route for me. I'm trying to get in the engine's head. If it's a single story residence, I want to force the front door because I know that's where they're going to travel. I might back up and let them have it. But, kind of backing up a little bit farther, we we train on trying to understand on the truck the layout of the house, which we call the situational size up, before we even go in. So the front door for me might not be my best option if, I'm looking at bedrooms and closets as, relation to where victims are found mostly. So I'm really geared to, let me open the door for you, get out of your way, good luck. I will be at the end of the hall before you. I hope to be, and via through the window. So I really just like to compartmentalize and take it one step at a time, and just kind of give them the room that they need to bring in loops and et cetera. But there's not a whole lot that changes. I might choose to horizontally vent a little bit stronger, just because it's quicker than vertical. And I know they got, depending on who it is, and I know that they're good with that line and they're going to make a strong push, I might take a couple more windows, knowing that they're going to be able to exhaust that pretty quickly, which would benefit them and then benefit us and the victim. So that'd be just about the only tweak that I make, is just creating that exhaust. Other than that, I'm going to dive in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, going back, for me, I mean, going back to what I said earlier, I mean, the offensive trap, that's like the only fire we prepare for. That's that's the only offensive fire type that we prepare for. So everything else is just a scaled back version of that. And so there is not really anything for us that I would expect to change. I'm glad you guys both brought up the 360 thing, because I mean, that is something that, whether people want to admit it or not, you hear people saying like, oh, there's people trapped. I don't have time to do 360. Let's look at that from a shade of gray, right, and understand what the point of it is. The point of the a 360, however you do it, whether it's one person running around the building, or whether it's the first company that positions in the front and the first company that positions in the rear, or whatever version. But the point of it, at least in my book, is to identify, on the engine side of things, to identify where the fire is and what the best route of attack is to get a line on that fire. And from the truck side of thing, it's kind of twofolded, to identify where the fire is and where the potential victims are, so that I can determine what the best and fastest route to that victim location is. And, and on the ventilation side of things, to identify where the fire is and where the search is going to be and where the engine is going to be, so that I can, like you're saying, Bill, make the ventilation decisions that are going to support the operation. So now, I mean, that there's a couple of things there. It would be easy of me to say, yeah, just, don't worry about the 360, or yeah, just always do the 360 or whatever. I mean, are there experienced fire officers that can pull up at the front of a building and say, look, bro, the fire is blowing out of the front living room. I can see the side. There's nothing really coming out the back. I know where the fire is. And I also know the stairs are cut off because of this house being laid out this way. So that tells me that my, most likely going to be looking at VES for behind the fire and above the fire. Like, there are people that, that are dialed in enough, or situations that are obvious enough where you might have enough information to make that initial action without that full view. But there are also a scary number of times where people who maybe don't have that, aren't thinking all the way through that, like that, rush to action. And a rush to action, if you're lucky, will get you a great result. And if you're not lucky, will get you a terrible result. You know what I mean? And so you really want to make sure that you've got a good handle on where the fire is, and where the line placement should go, what the best route is to those victims, and what ventilation is going to support this the most. But, another one that comes up, and we won't dive too deep down this rabbit hole, is I was going to have, a water supply, but now that there are people trapped, I'm not at all worried about that. What do you think about that, Frank? Are we abandoning water supply actions because of entrapments?
So, I know it's a very, very hot topic right now. We've touched on it a little bit, but I personally don't believe in it. You lay out for every other box alarm we run. Why would that be the one exception? And I see, the argument is the time delay. Well, if you're proficient in that action, it's a very minimal time delay, and you can make your time up somewhere else. Getting your mask quick, getting that line stretched quickly, getting the door open quickly. what happens when we had people trapped, so we didn't lay out, so you stretch on it and you exhaust your tank water, and you got have committed past that fire. Then what?
And I've been on that fire, and that's perhaps why I'm so passionate about it, is because I have been on that fire, unfortunately, more than once. Where we thought we were being there for them and being there for the victim and making an aggressive search, and so we didn't have time, for 360s. We didn't have time for water, and because we didn't have a real awareness of what we were getting into, and we didn't have enough water to put it out, we neither completed the search or rescued the victim, and we hurt a couple firemen. Now, again, I'm not going to dive down this rabbit hole. I fight fire on tank water. And what I mean by that is, we stop and we lay that dry line, but we're not waiting for somebody to charge that supply line. That's not what we're talking about here. But that's another podcast to talk all about that water supply stuff. But just remember, and you can see it in the comments here already starting, that a lot of people realize that there's a synergy, or there's a yin and yang between putting the fire out and getting the victims out, and which came first, the chicken or the egg. Obviously, the number one end goal is rescuing the civilians. And if we burn the building to its foundation and we saved everybody that was inside, that was a very successful fire. But, you have to buy time to make that rescue. And that's a topic I want to dive a little deeper into in a couple of minutes. So, when you pull up and you're the first arriving engine company on the fire, Frank, what are your initial actions going to be?
Get the line in place and either get water on the fire or at a very minimum, get that line in between where these traffic victims are and the fire. Thus allowing either your special service or your crew members from the engine company to then search off the line and get a hold of this person, or protecting the steps. If you got a first floor fire, you're keeping fire from advancing up the steps. So that's going to be more conducive for those guys who are working on a vent under search or have committed to utilizing the steps and then have that route to get down or whatever. But ultimately getting water on the fire. But to say like, oh yeah, you put the fire out and then we're good to go. Well, sometimes fires take a little bit to get out. So to simply commit just to putting fire out and then all of a sudden everything's better. Well, that whole time you're doing that, they're still up there gagging on smoke and hot air and all that. Yeah,
that's very true. And so let's kind of shift a little bit here. I think when we talk about the company operations for departments that might be like downtown Frederick, might be around Dentsville in Columbia, South Carolina, or might be in downtown Salisbury where I work, and a bunch of companies are going to get there in fairly short order, then the answer to the what do you do question is easy. The answer is everything. You do everything, right? And whenever you have the opportunity to do everything because you have enough people quickly enough, well, I mean, that makes things substantially easier. So I want to put ourselves in a tough spot. And this is a tough spot that, might be unique for us, or might be an outlier for us, but for some people it's their everyday. And the scenario is that you are the only company on scene, and so what's not going to be allowed in this discussion is, oh, well, I'm going to do this and have the next company do this. The scenario I'm putting you in is that it's a shit or get off the pot fire, right? And by the time the next company gets here, whenever that might be, then it's going to be too late, right? I mean, now is the time for the action. That's the scenario we're in. And I also want to put us a little bit in the box of being around a 3-person company, right? I know there's a lot of guys out there who ride with 2. There are some that ride with 4, and there are a few that are lucky to ride with more. But let's say we've got 3 people. We got a driver, we got an officer, and we've got a firefighter. And let's start real quickly. Frank, let's kind of reframe that scenario a little bit. There is that you pulled up and we got a good-looking fire, in a residential building. You have somebody saying there's somebody in that building, and it's John Wayne time. What is your engine going to do?
Yeah, so I'm gonna defer back to like situational dependent. When you got heavy fire on the first floor, sometimes people are going to be able to provide you. If it's somebody that was in the house and said, hey, they were up there in that bedroom, that room right there. That really helps. If you don't have that kind of information available, then, you have no choice but to toss the whole place. Not that you're going to toss the whole place anyway, but, with the information, you at least have a starting point. Ultimately, like you got to get water on the fire. So I may be tasking my lineman with getting water on the fire, and then I'm breaking off and going to do that search by myself. If they're telling me they're in an upstairs bedroom, and they could say, hey, that's that window right there. I might even have my wagon driver. This may be taboo, but hey, let the water go, and you start flowing water from the outside while we throw a ladder and get in that window to get this person.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's totally out of the ordinary. But it's also an out of the ordinary situation a little bit too.
Yeah,
100%.
I would agree with that too. First of all, I don't want to go to this fire. You know what I mean? Like this is a bad spot for me. But I understand that people do it and it's tough. But I agree with Frank on what he was saying. Not to go like defense, not to jump into defense and offense, but I don't. Depending on the situation, if it's just a 1,000 square foot house and one window is blowing fire, then okay, engineer, stretch 1 3/4 inches. We've already laid our line. Hopefully, we can supply it in due time. And if we're on tank water, 750, 500,000 gallons, whatever it is, dump what you can into that and know that I'm going to run a 360 and I'm going to get into this house and make a push. I can only search for so long without water on the fire. So, you got to have it there at some point. So I guess either go in and try and make an aggressive attack altogether, or knock it down as far as you can with one person on the outside, and say goodbye to the other two. They're going in. So
yeah.
Hey, I just thought of another one, a local one. This was within the last year. 3-story garden apartment. It was an outside-in fire. Started at the ground level, burned up the outside. Had heavy fire from the ground up to the roof. First engine all by themselves arrived and put the deck gun in service, reported people trapped, and just getting that big water on that fire and knocking down the bulk of it. I think they affected something like 6 to 8 rescues.
Yeah,
did a tremendous job.
Yeah, and I I said I wasn't going to go down this road, but again, if you go down that, how long, if you're talking about flowing water from the outside, which I think most of us would agree is not as an efficient application of water as inside, meaning that you're going to waste some water. If you haven't done anything to put hose between you and a water supply, how far is that 500 or 750 gallons go when you're using the wagon pipe? Yeah, now I'm not talking about leaving a guy at the hydrant to charge it either, but the other way I look at it is that, the ambulance, the cop, the battalion chief or whatever, if the hose is already there, somebody can hook it up and charge it and keep on going, and that might keep you with some water. But when you get into these tactics that are going to require a lot of free flow of water to buy you time, you better have that water. You know what I'm saying? But I think you guys hit on probably the top 2 deciding factors in this decision tree is number one, where is the fire? If I pull up and you got fire out the front door and the front windows, well, that's easy, right? I can put one guy on a hose line and he's immediately at the seat of the fire. I can have the driver use the wagon pipe. It's right there. So any of those scenarios where it's a really easy stretch to the seat of the fire, whether that's outside the building or inside the building, that's great. But, where that would become a problem is, we pull up and you've got that house with just smoke boiling out everywhere. And there is no obvious seat of the fire. There is no fire blowing out anything. You're not, from the outside exactly sure where it is. And to me, that's a hallmark of a basement fire or a below grade fire. But, you also have fires that are just centered in the center of the building. They're just seated in the center of the building. And so that becomes a problem, right? Because if I can't apply water to the seat of the fire from the outside, well, then my next thing is I got to get a line on this fire. I saw a lot of comments on my post on Facebook and Instagram today about, hey, one guy make the stretch. You got to pony up and do it. I have no problems with that. I would do that. I have done that. I get it. But, there are also some stretches that you can pony up as hard as you want. Like, it's going to be real hard to get that line to the seat of the fire without somebody feeding you some line. And maybe once they feed you some line, they back off and go do the search or whatever. But, I have also seen what happens where, all right, I'm going to just man up and take this line by myself and try and push down the hallway. I open up the door. I'm pushing down the hallway. I'm busting my ass trying to move the line. It's not really going anywhere. Fire knows that door's open now. It wants to come to that door, and now it's coming over my head before I can get to the seat of the fire. You know what I mean? So I think we really have to make sure that if we're taking priority away from the water application, we have a lot of confidence that whoever we've assigned to get water on it can handle that. The other way to look at that is there a way to isolate it? Is there fire blowing out of these windows here, but the rest of the house is pretty clear because the smoke or because the door is holding, right? Or because it's isolated. I think the other thing that's critical that you mentioned is what's the victim location. Like if you pull up and you say, where are they at? And they say the baby is in that window and they're pointing at a window. I think everybody on here, regardless of what kind of thing you came on, is going in that window, right? But if they say, where are they? And they say in there somewhere, and you're looking at a 1,400 foot, 900 foot, a 2,200 square foot house, and you're like, man, it's smoke to the floor throughout the whole thing. And I have no idea where they're at. The only way to find them is a blind search or blind luck. What I begin to think about that is, can I do a targeted VES without water application? Probably, right? And I would support that. Can I search, left hand or right hand search this entire house, without water application? Probably not. You know what I mean? I'm probably not going to get through that. So, and again, I can't speak to the entirety of a situation. It's going to depend on the size of a building, right, the layout of the building, and what you see when you get there. But these are things you've got to be thinking about, right?
And it's amazing what you can make a fireman do and not do. If you show up, hey, everybody's out. Yeah, well, I don't believe you. Hey, there's a baby in that window. Okay, I'm going right there. You know what I mean? It's amazing that we choose to believe, one thing and not the other. It's almost like you can make a fireman jump off a bridge.
Yeah.
Like you just have to jump off this bridge. There's a baby down there. Okay, no problem. I'm gone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So and that's what I was talking about, kind of gearing yourself to being the same fireman, not doing the same stuff on the scene, but be the same, hardworking, quick on your feet fireman. Your chief knows that that's what you're going to do when you show up, and you're going to be doing the right thing because you are repetition and that's how you train. And, things seem to go a little bit smoother that way. I mean, we can throw wrenches at this house all day. I mean, going all the way back to the engineer, should the engineer be dressed? Or does he still have to get dressed in this scene? Who do I take into this fire with me? Do I take the new guy on the nozzle with a search? And he is not really sure what to do and leave the engineer out to handle all water? Or should my engineer have been dressed on the way there or partly dressed on the way there, and I take him inside and then the nozzleman stays outside, or do we tackle this all together? So kind of I feel like if this were to happen in real life, you kind of would almost just team up together as a 3-person, find the seat, dump one guy on the nozzle, say, you got this until I'll come back to you or whatever. And you branch off and start doing searches that way, or you hit it from the outside for a little bit as long as you can sustain. I'm glad that it's amazing that they were able to knock out 3-4 floors of fire with the deck gun, but that's probably the only it's probably all the water they had. They basically just dumped it. It'd be nice in a perfect situation, an unwelcome situation like this, to kind of treat tank water like a water can, and you have to kind of get in there to maximize its efficiency, and let vapor and water droplets do its thing. So
yeah.
That's a super tough one, but what I was getting at is just kind of just try and track and be the same person, and kind of just gear it that way, and things seem to go a little bit smoother.
Here's one for you. Shout it out if you got a thought on this. 2-man engine company, 900 square foot house with a victim, last known location, alpha side window on a bed. What are you doing? I think the constraint there is 2-man company. That's where it gets weird, right? I mean, if it's 3-man company, I think I got an easy answer. What do you do when you have 2 people, driver and officer, and 900 square foot, and they say he's in there? he sleeps in the bed in that window on
Yeah.
the side.
I mean, so if I don't do anything, fire will get bigger and get worse. So quite frankly, I guess I'm going to make that effort to make that push on a search.
Yep.
I got two people. If we're geared up, ready to go, I'll get in there for a short second. I mean, two people, three people, four or five, it doesn't really matter. Ghost pump.
Yeah.
See that now.
If you don't know, now you know.
Yeah, exactly. Somehow it just happens, but
Well, the other one I'm thinking on that is, and I don't have the whole scene in front of me, so I mean,
yeah, it's how much fire is showing. You know what I mean? Like this is where my mind is going. If it's just like what the next room is on fire, okay, maybe
what
we
I'm
can knock it and dive in.
I'm thinking if my visualization of it tells me that I can VES this, I'm a VES it, right? I mean, if they're saying they're in that alpha side window and I can take that window and cut that door off and get them out with my driver or whatever helping me, then that's probably my move. I mean, that's based on the information that I'm given there is the most likely place that person's going to be. So, but a lot of variables in that. Yeah.
Exactly. One person dive in. Let's say that the driver's still getting dressed. This is what I'm doing. I dive in. I have a successful VS, or maybe I don't. And either, hey, I got a victim. Go get something. We're going to convert this thing to a window to door, or come in here and help me flop them out really quick, or however it plays out. I don't know, but yeah, I think definitely if I don't do anything, it obviously is going to get worse. So yeah.
Hey man, he's on light duty. What else do you want him to do? But
I have at least 14 text messages from stop drinking to those are my beers. Is this sponsored by Miller Lite?
To I'm jealous.
What are you doing?
Yeah. But I mean, this is an interesting talk because we're talking about the engine and this person trapped scenario. And another thing that's interesting to add into it is that if you look at things like the firefighter rescue survey and stuff like that, and a lot of us have had these experiences ourselves, is that honestly, one of the most, it's very common that the engine is the person that finds a victim during a normal stretch, right? I mean, even not in this only one on the scene scenario. So that is almost a similar discussion, right? Is that, okay, we just pulled up at this fire, it's normal operations. Frank and I go in on the line together, officer, firefighter, normal thing. We're going down the hall, see the glow at the end of the hall, and then crap, there's a victim in the middle of the hall that passed out while they were trying to get out of the building. What do we do? Do we drop the line and pull them out? Do we pass the victim and let the truck get them? Or does one of us take the victim and one of us keep making the push? And I can give you a scenario where all three of those are the right, I can find a scenario where one of those is the right answer and the other two are wrong. And for each one of them, you know what I'm saying? There's a scenario where all of those are right and the other ones are wrong.
Yeah, for sure. How big is it? Is it a 10-year-old or is it a 90-pound elderly woman? Is the truck even behind you to hand them off? So yeah, all of those could be the right answer.
Yeah. And that could be another discussion for a whole night. I mean, you could say, oh, obvious. You grab that one and get them out. You ever try to explain anything to anybody in a hallway where they're all trying to put it in and you're the one guy trying to go the opposite way on the road?
Right.
And you got the mask mouth. I got a baby. What? You're being a baby? I got a baby. I mean, it'd be easier to hand them out. You know what I mean? So, a lot of things. But there's a lot of rabbit holes that we could go down on that. Here is one that is interesting I want to talk about. And Bill, you recently got promoted out of Ladder 7, which for people who don't know is a dry ladder company. Does not have a tank and water on it. And also is a single truck house. They're the only company in the quarters. And it's a busy section of downtown. It would not be uncommon for there to be a fire out back and, 1, 13, whoever, the local engine companies to be out. What would your actions be at this scenario where, as a dry ladder truck, John Wayne time, and there, the engine is not going to be there soon enough?
Yeah, that's, it's a situation that's not boring, but, there's a lot that I can do, but you have to kind of focus on what the truck does. If they're fighting the building and not the fire, I can't really instill too much fight into this building because traditionally the things that I do to this building will make the fire worse. I'm relying on getting in that engine's head. I'm relying on coordinated attack. So, some of my biggest actions are I got time to do a 360 at this point. I can kind of gear that. I should be geared in that mentality anyway. So run that 360, have strong radio communication. The fire is here. Forcing a door on the front side, the Bravo side. Hey, next due engine, this is where you're going to be coming in. This is where I'd like you, whether it's, calling on hydrants, things of that nature. But if you got a victim, obviously things change. I'm a big fan of, VESing because as I take that window, I horizontally vent. And then if I do VES, at least I can isolate that bedroom. We all know how much a hollow core door does hold up and X amount of heat. So if I do just do that systematic approach where I'm compartmentalizing and I'm searching at the same time, I don't have to really abide by 2 in 2 out at that point. I would have 2 in 2 out, but there's, as far as like vertical ventilation, stuff like that really doesn't get done. I'm not a fan of that. I'm a big proactive person on horizontal because of how many members it only takes, which is 1. It's easier, it's quicker, and it becomes an exit.
Yeah.
And an entrance for me. So I'm really focusing on, compartmentalizing, softening, and radio communication.
What do you think, Frank?
I mean, I think to expand on that, depending on the layout of the structure, sometimes probably VESing could be quicker, depending how many people you got to fight through to get down a hallway or go room to room, where you could go room to room just from the exterior, while also confining the fire, or isolating.
Yeah.
So like that was something when I was a lieutenant on Squad 3, that was kind of like a go-to for the residentials, just because you didn't have to fight past the engine companies that were in the hallway or on the stairs.
I think I'm thinking, the situation I'm painting in my head, and of course, I think VES, on the dry ladder truck, where there is no hose line option, it's a dry ladder truck. Like Bill's saying, compartmentalization, keeping it sealed up is your friend, right? My normal engine truck operations is going to be a split crew for basically outside work, which is mostly ventilation, and the inside work for the search. Well, the inside work for the search still needs to continue. If I don't have the ability to get water on the fire, the need for ventilation is, very, very low. So I would be reprioritizing that outside team entirely towards VES. And then depending on the situation in front of me, I might, as the inside team, go in and, and make the searches from the inside, trying to compartmentalize as I go. Or I might say I'm better off VESing. Remember, an inside team can still VES. If that's what's going to keep the structure sealed up, if that's what I think is going to limit the ability of the fire to extend and progress, since I don't really have more than 2.5 or 5 gallons of water to put on this fire, then that's what I would do. Is I'd probably be heavily oriented towards the VES, right? So
yeah, how fast can you knock out a 3-bedroom 2-bath house, with 4 members or 6 members, when you're VESing. So, again, situation dependent, depends on where the fire's at. Is it in one of the bedrooms, or is it in the kitchen that's attached to the dining room or the living room or such? So, again, I agree with taking a window and diving in.
Yeah. Frank, here is an interesting scenario. So, you and I are both battalion chiefs with take-home vehicles. You got air pack in yours?
Absolutely.
I knew that, right? But all right, so you're on the way home, or you just got a Frosty at Wendy's, and the box goes out, and it's around a corner, and you pull up, and you are the first arriving fire department person, and somebody banging on your window, my kid's in there, or my mom's in there, or whatever, and there's no companies coming down the street. What are you doing?
I'm gonna make a move. 100%. I don't know how you would defend not doing that.
Yeah.
So depending on the conditions, like I'll make like a rat. I'm gonna find a way in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna find a way in. sometimes you might have to get creative with some of these places where, I've played this scenario out like when I was younger on the job and assigned to an ambulance where, you may be waiting for a fire engine for a little bit, like having to put the unit like right up against the house and use that to get into a second floor window. But you know what I mean? Like you may have to get creative to make it happen, but like that's the call, man. Like you said, the offensive fire with people trapped. That's the call that everybody's waiting for.
Yeah, and me too. And this goes a lot into, so to be clear, if I pull up gear, air pack, tell them on the radio what I'm doing, and see y'all when you get here. I'm gonna be inside. I love to make like a rat analogy, but I mean this kind of goes to some of the mindset that we talk about in the aggressive command class about firefighting chiefs. I mean, there how many chiefs vehicles around here around the country, the guys don't have turnout gear in them, don't have an air pack, like they just like, oh, I'm a chief, I don't do that anymore. I'm like, is that what you're going to tell the mother when she bangs on your glass? Like it says fire department on the side of that thing. So, things that are in my car is my gear is laid out to get dressed just as quickly as if I was on a fire truck. Air pack, halogen bar, my box light, I have a water can, I even have a couple other things, but I have the stuff, to basically, to come off like I was on the inside team of the truck, for lack of a better term. And funny story, Bill, I think this was the day you missed or whatever, but we were setting up for a class here in my town, and we caught a fire, and it was a middle of the day fire, and it was a townhouse. It was blowing, and I got there before any of the companies. Now, fortunately, I wasn't the first chief there. I was the second chief there. Actually, the fire chief got there before me, and then I got there, and then nobody else is coming. And, it's a daytime fire, reports of people trapped in the building. So I'm grabbing my water can and we're going to make a move. And I was fairly new here then. And a guy that I didn't know that well then that I know pretty well now, I know he's a great fireman now. This was my first fire with him. So this thing is getting it. We run up to the front of the building and I'm masking up and I know I'm making a move with nobody here. Right. And it's on the top floor. So it's not like there's a whole lot of ability for me to isolate in this top floor of a townhouse. There's just not a lot of space. And we're going to make a move inside. And I think I got it on video somewhere. I remember looking over at him and go, "You're coming, right?" And he's never lived that down. He goes, "Yeah, of course I'm coming." But it was kind of funny. I guess you had to be there. But anyway. If I pull up first, it says fire department side of the car. That's what I'm going to do. And in all reality, I would make a radio transmission. Hey, I'm on a scene. I have, here's my size up. I have reported a victim trapped. I am going to BES, the first floor, Bravo window. I'm going through the front door. I would try to give them an idea of where I'm going so that when they get there, they can support that. But I'm 100%, making a move. Right.
How much, not to question you, but how much information would you need to make that decision? Of course it would depend on, okay, are my guys a minute out or are they 5 minutes out? That's a huge gap, right? So, do you just roll down your window and the neighbor says, "Hey, I'm pretty sure there might be somebody in that," with a minute out, or, do you say, "I understand. Hey, I'm going to relay that information. They're right around the corner."
That's so hard.
Should they have it? Or do you need like the retired captain from Fidney saying, "Hey, this is my house. My daughter's in that room"?
If I have any reliable, obviously I'm already assuming there's somebody trapped in there. So, right. The biggest liar I know saying there's somebody trapped in there is still amping it up for me. And it's so hard to answer like what I would do without a live situation. But I think what I'm thinking about is like, all right, the guy just told me there's somebody trapped. Like, I see engine one coming, making the turn down the corner. Like, am I going to be able to get my gear on and get into this situation before they get here? Like, they've already got their stuff on. They're ready to work. Like, if I know that they're going to beat me to it anyway, then as much as I want to engage, like, my best job here is going to be to take the command role and coordinate the firefight, right? Now, if I get that information and I don't see him or hear him, and I feel like I can make the move before they get here, then I probably will be making the move, especially if I know there's another chief coming, right? I'm in an area where we're going to get the on-duty battalion, and we're going to get 2 or 3 of our staff chiefs, and we may get a chief officer from a neighboring department. So especially if I know there's somebody else to take that job, and I think I can make a difference, then I'm going to make the difference. Frank, you got any thoughts on that, or?
No, man. Like it's what's the real popular buzzword? Risk a lot to save a lot.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't get any more risky to save a lot than that. You know what I mean? Like that's one of those you make a move, get a high school named after you or something.
Yeah, 100%. Right. So some definitely some good thoughts here. I'm just kind of looking at some of the topics here. I think a couple of the big things that we're dealing with. The principal issue that we're dealing with is this issue of what's more important, to get water on the fire first, or to get the searches and the victim first. Like, let's just talk for a second about how those two play with each other or interplay with each other. What do you guys think?
I mean, I've always been okay and accepted the fact that if I pulled the victim out and I turned around and looked at the house and it was foundation, I was cool with that. But of course, I'm not there, and I don't see it. I'm, the way that I work, my wheels turn. When I get there, I try and be good at having X-ray vision, so to speak, when I get there and kind of seeing the layout and reading the smoke and things of that nature. But obviously water wins. It always will. Anything that the truck does could potentially make things worse if they're working on the side of ventilation. But I will risk what I have to get the victim out if it makes sense for me to make a quick attack before that happens, because to play into this a little bit farther, nobody's really moved an average victim very quick. So if I exhaust my efforts getting in there with no plan of fire attack in my back pocket at all, then quite frankly, I'll get there and then have to back up and punt and chase that line. But, what wins, in a perfect scenario, if it's a viable victim that I can get out, I think that really making that effort for life safety over property conservation is going to win for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's not a debate, right? Like when we talk about the fire attack versus the victim, like what I mean by that is when I say I'm talking about in context of saving the victim, right? I mean, obviously if we burn the house down, the objective is to save the person, but how do we balance the fact that like we talked about a couple times already that at some point, you have to keep the environment tenable to support the rescue. And what does that is water application. Mm-hmm. Are there some times when you go in the window and you grab a 15-pound baby and it's right on out? Yeah, I'm 100%, right? But I mean, there's also sometimes, I don't know, I'm sure, guys understand you found a 175-pound guy, or woman, just a 175-pound adult in a zero visibility hallway. That's one of the most hardest things you're going to do in your life, dragging that person out by yourself. And if you're getting ate up by fire while you're doing it, well, it's not doing you any good, and it's certainly not doing them any good. Don't forget that they're not in gear in an air pack, So I think that is important for people to realize that when we talk about choosing attack line or search, like the question is not like property or person. The question is like, well, man, can I finish the search and make the grab without the water? Or do I need the water to support making the grab? Frank, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I think it's situational dependent. But yeah, I mean, like otherwise, with if you're not able to compartmentalize it, if you go in as a truck and you got a room going and the door's still intact, getting that door shut. If the top half of the door is already burned away, maybe posting a guy up with a can just to give it a couple shots periodically. To buy you some time to get, that search underway. But yeah, I mean, and the more we talk about this, I'm thinking of more scenarios around here. This has been the case. There was a fire right across the street from one of the firehouses, reported people trapped. Unbeknownst to them, they had jumped out a back window prior to the fire department's arrival, but the lineman posted up at the top of the stairs of this middle of the road townhouse The lieutenant went and tossed the back 2 rooms. It was the front master bedroom going. And just the volume of fire, man. Even that guy with the line, man, the kid absolutely got shredded. And hats off to him. Never budged, man. Never gave up his position. Kept getting water on the fire. But that's what allowed that search to continue.
Yeah, it does make me think. I remembered another scenario. I was on a tower, and we ran a box on this side of town at a school, actually. And so we sent all the engines and trucks over here. Turned out to be nothing. We cleared pretty quick. We're on our way back to the firehouse, and they put out a box on the other side of the firehouse for a townhouse fire. Pull up with fire cranking out of the second floor. It was the end of the row, so it was side Alpha and side Bravo. Fire blowing out the front half of the second floor of the townhouse. Lady saying, "My kid's up there." Dry ladder truck. So dry ladder truck again. Don't tell me to stretch a hose line. There ain't no hose line to stretch, and there ain't no engine coming. Not right now. It was probably 5 or so minutes before the first engine got there. So I was running the can or the hook position. So I had the hook in the can, in classic move that everybody talks about. I went up to the top of the stairs, 180 to the front, and was able to grab the door with the hook and pull the door closed. I guess it works in some scenarios. I've heard people talking about putting out an entire room of fire with a water can. I spent half of the water can to figure out that wasn't going to work, right? And then I was fortunately kept the other 1.25 gallons, and pulled the door closed and basically just focused on spritzing when it would start to burn through. And it was hot, and the door started burning like all the way down. It got to like the halfway point before the Irons firefighter who had gone to the back to search the back bedroom where the kid was supposed to be, had cleared the search. And, then fortunately we got out of there. There ended up not being anybody trapped in there, but it was a sticky situation. And hindsight being 2020, I mean, I was a younger firefighter then, and I probably know a little bit more now than I did then. I didn't even consider VES as an opportunity to get that second floor bedroom, and maybe that would have been a better move. Maybe not, because the first floor was clear and it was a beeline up the steps, and I mean, it worked out okay. But it does just make me. It's a good experience to reflect on and think about a little bit. But so, any other thoughts on the water versus fire kind of thing?
It's such a hard debate because it's super situational dependent, and you try and come up with a direct answer to a question that's so direct, and it's tough because it's based on situation. So I think it both have to happen.
Yeah.
For success.
Well,
at some point.
I think you hit on it pretty early in the show that the key is the plan, right? I mean, this is something. If you haven't talked about this lately, go to the next day you're at the firehouse, sit around with your crew and talk about this, and constrain the conversation to not what you're going to do when it's 2 or 3 companies there, but when it's just you. What are you going to do, right? I mean, and have that conversation, and whether that's a scenario that's likely for you or unlikely, I think the conversation will be beneficial. You should probably also have the conversation, if you're on an engine, about, hey, what are we going to do, if we're making a push down a hallway one day and we encounter a victim along the path? We gonna pass them? We gonna hand them back? We gonna take them out? What are we gonna do? Have those conversations. Talk about the what ifs. Travel the different roads and see where it goes. And I don't think you're gonna say, all right, we found this one size fits all approach. This is what we're going to do all the time. But the more you talk about it, the more likely you're going to be able to have something to choose from and be able to communicate it easily, when you're on that fire ground that night. Another thing I thought of earlier that I did want to bring up is, if this is the first time you've heard me speak, this might be new to you, but if you've heard me speak before, you've probably figured out I'm a little bit of a regimented person, and I'm pretty ABC 1, 2, 3. One thing that we do have in our operational SOGs for our, what our companies are assigned to do on a box alarm is, we do have a provision in there for the first in engine to completely abandon fire attack and to make a rescue. And it is a very rare thing. It is specified in there that this is a very rare thing. But we do understand that there could be a circumstance where we all have to go all hands to making this rescue. This is what we're here for, and we're not going to be able to get a water supply, or we're not going to be able to stretch a line or whatever. And basically, the way we've adapted that is that in our policy, what it says then is that they would announce that on the radio, and at that point, we would basically pretend they weren't there. I mean, of course, we're not pretending they're not there, but from an engine perspective, everybody would bump up. The person that was going to be second due is now first due, third due to set. You get what I'm saying? Everybody would bump up in the running order, and we would not pretend that they have in any way filled the first in engine duties. Does that make sense? Frank, do you guys have anything like that, or has anything like that ever happened for you guys?
So it's not spelled out as such, but I mean, if we have it, I guess there's kind of like a catch-all in a policy that if there's any kind of deviation, it just needs to be communicated.
Yeah. Bill, is that?
We do this. I mean, we have something similar. You're familiar with our guidelines. I mean, we can jump into a fast attack mode, but since it's super situational, I mean, this just kind of goes back to how you train. I mean, if you're put in that instance where you got three people on an engine and you're the only ones, I mean, what can the officer and the fireman do in the time that it takes the engineer to get dressed?
Yeah.
Can the officer do a 360, soften the entry, and the firefighter throw 2 ladders while the engineer gets dressed, and whoever stretches the line, here we go.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, we do the same thing.
Yeah, and that's come up a couple times. The guy driving, I could never drive dressed. I mean, when I drove the truck, I might drive with my pants on, or if I was tillering, I would drive with my pants and my coat on. But I could never drive, especially the engine dressed. But I mean, I think what that goes to is guys just, you see a lot of guys are like, oh, I just drive, so my gear is in a red bag. It's practically sealed with a padlock, and if I remember to put it on the fire truck, it's like, tucked in 67 ways sideways under all the other parts. And I think what you bring up there is a good point to remember that, okay, just because you're driving and it's unlikely that you'll have to get dressed out and get into firefighting doesn't mean it's impossible. And if you have to, it's going to be a pretty critical situation. So make sure that you're still keeping your stuff in that, kind of combat ready setup to be able to get dressed quick.
And in our situation, you're a part of RIT until we establish a RIT team. So, I mean, I'd like to see you in at least pants and a flash hood. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it doesn't take much time to, get the rest on. So.
Very good. Very good. So what do you got, Frank? Any other thoughts or anything?
No, man, I'm not sure. I think we shared a bunch of ideas, but I don't think, we came up with any definitive action. You know what I mean? Like we've said a million times, it's all situational dependent. So, different scenarios are going to require different actions. But I think the biggest thing was just having the conversation and taking that conversation back to the firehouse around the table or in the engine bay or whatever. Conversation, man. I think it's one of the most underutilized tools in the fire department is talking about stuff. And I know around here you get to talk about stuff, and next thing you know, it's 11 o'clock at night and you're crawling around the engine bay working through what you just got done talking about. Some of these places.
Yeah. And kind of as we kind of wrap things up and everything tonight, we've had a little over an hour here to talk about this. I think that you're 100% right. It is situational dependent. There's not a one-size-fits-all answer. What that does not mean is, well, just wait till you get on the front lawn and then you can think about some ideas and figure out how to do them. What I think it means is you got to go to the firehouse, like you're saying, and you got to what if this, what if that, all right, well, how about in this situation? What if that happened? Kind of spitball all the different situations you can think of and come up with the solution so that for lack of a better term, you're building that Rolodex of ideas in your head, and then you can just pull from that Rolodex, when you get to the fire, as opposed to trying to completely invent the plan,
Right. And you can't pull from that Rolodex if you've never done it before, because it's not in there. So, I mean, I would assume that we're wrapping up, and that's the point, is to put yourself in a situation that you haven't been before. train on at least once or twice, and we're advocates of that, as a training company and trying to provide information. But, that's what it boils down to, is really putting yourself in a position that you haven't been in before and really trying to figure out, hey, what if we're delayed by more than a couple of minutes and staffing has put us on 3? I mean, that can happen in the city, let alone somebody that does it all the time. So, I mean, that's a good reason to continue, that fight for, combat readiness.
Yeah. Yep, 100%. Here's a good little question that's popped up. I'm about to close it up, but I can't pass an opportunity to talk about masking up. So, I mean, on the rig or not in the rig or sometimes, or any thoughts on this?
I mean, I think if I was riding the back, I would mask up. I don't, and we're first due. I know the area, again, situation. It's going to be a 200-foot cross lay or pre-connect. I'm cool with being masked up. I'm cool with being masked up before I get to a dumpster fire and a car fire as well. But if in my position, there have been times where, why couldn't I just have the engineer announce on scene? What he's not good enough to say ladder 14's on scene, second due support, first due support. You know what I mean? If I'm not going to be first due and I know that, as an officer, I can get masked up if I wanted to and say, hey, when we arrive, put us out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We got victims trapped. I'm gone. You know what I mean? So something to think about.
Right.
Yeah. So I kind of echo what Bill was saying. Like when I was running the line, and I knew like we're going to a fire, man. Like I would have my mask on and off we went. As the first due engine company officer, I typically didn't, just because of giving the on scene report, and then doing that 360. I can't say one way or another whether this is a factor or not, but like cutting out some of the peripherals by having a mask on when you're doing that 360.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my 2 cents is, and a lot of people know I'm very pro masking up at the door quickly. Are there circumstances where I would advocate masking up on the rig? Yeah, like the guy said there in the comment, if you're running, especially if you're running the line, the nozzle position, and your district, and I can picture that street. I know, okay, for 1 stories, setting about 50 foot off the curb, we're going to run the bumper line. Yeah, I got that. But if you don't know the district, or if you don't know, or if man, yeah, okay, that's going to be, a courtyard at apartment. We're going to have to run 100 feet through a courtyard before I go up 3 flights of stairs. Like, maybe that's not the time to be masking up. Or if I'm going to be stretching down the alley, maybe I don't want to be masked up while I'm running a line that long. If you've got that kind of awareness of your operations in your district, you can begin to make, decisions like that. But the one thing that really goes up me the wrong way sometimes is when people, discount the need to be able to mask up quickly because they're like, oh, I'm just going to mask up on the rig. That's great. That's swell. There might be plenty of situations where masking up on the rig is what you ought to do. But I can also give you dozens of situations where you're going to need to mask up when you're not off the rig because you were a driver and now you're participating in VES. What, are you going to wear your mask while you're driving? Or because you're the OV and you're throwing ladders and moving saws. You want to do all that while you're wearing a mask? No, you're going to end up masking up when you start to make the move to the roof or go in a window, right? Or, oh, okay, you were on the engine company, but then you came out for a minute and changed your cylinder, and now they're saying, hey, I need another line in here right now, and you got to get back. Like, okay, there are times when masking up at the rig, on the rig, would be a good idea. There are times when masking up at the door would be a good idea. But, that's both skill sets should be honed and fast. Even if you mask up on the rig sometimes or all the time, you still got to have the skill set of being able to mask up at the door, at the window, at the ladder, wherever, fast and efficiently, and make sure you
with gloves on.
Yep, with your gloves on, get it right. So
yeah, definitely not advocating to go into a high-rise fire masked up. But there are many instances in the city where I'm 30 feet from the building.
Yeah.
And that's as close and as far as I'm going to get the whole scene. So, if I was a fireman, and especially if I was blessed to wear Scott face pieces, I might mask up. So it's just, again, it's all situation.
Yeah, I hear you. So great conversation, everybody. I really appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. We had a great audience and some great comments. I really enjoyed seeing that you guys were engaging not only with us, but with each other. That's the strength of the group. We're all here to share and learn. I got a couple chuckles and a couple of tips, out of it myself. So we really appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got a couple of things, coming up over the next month or so. So stay tuned. We've got another webinar coming up. We've got some in-person classes you can get into, and we're always, looking for opportunities to take our programs elsewhere. So, if you know some people that should have listened to this that did not, if they come into the Facebook group, as soon as I hit end, they'll be able to watch the recording of this. And we also have it up as a podcast on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify just as soon as I can get it edited and uploaded, probably in the next day or so. So if you know somebody that should have watched it, that missed it, you can get them to see it and share it with them that way. So thanks everybody again. Thanks to Bill and Frank for jumping on the show tonight. And we hope we'll see you all on here next time. Bill, Frank, got anything?
That's it. Keep training. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. See you guys next time.